Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. With 10.2 announced, I wanted to go over some of the biggest changes that are coming in for the new patch, what they're going to mean, and what I'm most excited about going into it. So the new raid is going to be a Mirdrasil, which is going to be a 9-boss raid, and it's also going to feature a Dragonriding boss as one of them. I'm a little bit surprised at it being a 9-boss raid, but I will say that I'm not surprised at all to see Farak being the end boss, as he was extremely hyped up throughout this expansion to be the end boss. And interestingly enough, there is going to be a number of different mounts that are going to be coming around for killing this boss. Most notably, it's going to be with Farak having not only a mythic mount after defeating him, just like we usually have with a lot of mythic mounts, but there's also going to be 2 flavors of mounts that he will drop that'll have his appearance. So if you kill him on mythic difficulty, you'll get a Fire Owl, which is going to be a non-Drake mount with dynamic flight, meaning Dragonriding. But it's also going to have 2 flavors of Farak himself, just like you had with Razageth. One which could drop on any difficulty, and then a Shadow Flame version, which is going to drop from Ahead of the Curve. Now, this Ahead of the Curve kind of is making me think that we're going to be having 10.2 as the possible last expansion, or last patch of the expansion for Dragonflight. We might have like a faded season or something like that, but I really do believe that there's a high chance of Farak kind of capping off Dragonflight when it comes to the storyline and the season and for like the new raids. It seems that way from getting the mount off of like Ahead of the Curve. There's sort of the references that Farak makes in the middle of the patch in 10.1.7, talking about how Iridikron is gone. Viranoth is now joining the side of the aspects and everything like that to save the Emerald Dream, and we're going to be going through some of the story as it comes out when 10.2 drops. And it's sort of like a form of shrinkflation, where if you like buy a box of cereal and over time the price stays the same, but there's like just less cereal in it. I think that's kind of the way forward that they have for Dragonflight, and especially after we had it in Shadowlands, we've had it previously with Warlords, where they're just able to crank out expansions and use expansions as ways to be able to bring more players in rather than having a lengthier overall expansion with more content in it. Quicker expansion releases, more opportunities like bringing new players. I am kind of leaning in that direction for what I think 10.2 is going to sort of cap things off. When it comes to the legendary that they announced and talked about, it's going to be an axe of all things. I don't know why it's going to be an axe, but Farak has this pretty badass axe that he's wielding throughout some of the concept art and the setup, and it's going to be a 2-handed strength axe called Firalath, the Dream Render. It's going to be kind of cool, but they talked about how it actually is going to be a quest chain rather than just one random sort of drop that's going to come around. So it's kind of cool, although I am disappointed that there's not actually like a legendary for all. I was really anticipating it being like a ring of some sort, so kind of weird on that end. The Mythic Plus dungeon pool is going to be really sick, though. With Dawn of the Infinites, no surprise that they're going to add into the mix. And a lot of people were assuming Darkheart Thicket and Everbloom, since it's going to be more of an Emerald Dream vibe, which, of course, I think are going to be pretty good dungeons. I don't really like Darkheart personally. I also just played it a lot in Legion, so I'm kind of burnt out on it. But I think it'll actually be pretty good for the season. Blackrook Hold, I'm not a massive fan of either. I think Darkheart and Blackrook, when they had like that Legion M+ come back around, was like, we played it a bunch in Legion, they had the Legion M+ event, and now they're being brought back again. So I'm not as hype about the Legion dungeons, but Waycrest, Ataldazar, I think are going to be absolutely fantastic. And Throne of the Tides, I'm kind of worried about as being like a Vortex Pinnacle 2.0, where there's not much options with routing. There possibly could be some very annoying boss fights. Throne naturally had that like squid boss that would like mind control players, so I don't know exactly how they're going to do that. So there's a couple of those frustrations that I think Throne of the Tides could mimic from like Vortex Pinnacle for the new Dungeon M+ season. But overall, I think Dawn is going to be excellent. Like, I think Dawn is going to be super good when it comes to Mythic Plus, and the rest of the dungeons should be pretty good as well. When it comes to tier sets, we have a couple of them that have been released. On the left, we had the Warlock, middle is Hunter, right side is Monk that we had for these. Priest has a nuts one again, as usual, followed by just kind of like a bland warrior set up onto the left. We also have left for Paladin. So I'm pretty sure once again Paladins are going to be upset and really wish that they had the Priest's transmog, because it actually does look kind of thick. It is pretty cloth heavy though on that one. Middle one, I think people were saying it might be Druid. Right side looks like super mage oriented. And then, but this one also looks very druidy. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different like druid themed kind of transmogs from like the new renown and new events in the zone. All kinds of fun stuff like that. There's also going to be crazy dragon riding appearances with like a Fey dragon that you're going to have access to. Farak, like I mentioned before, is going to have a regular fire model that you're going to get from like any regular difficulty and then just have a low chance, just like with Razaketh. And then there's also going to be a Shadow Flame model that'll drop from ahead of the curve. So I believe this is more of the Shadow Flame model that they have here. And then there's some of the Nether Drake colors and customizations they also are going to be able to have access to. So that's also pretty sick, and you're probably going to want some of these for the Dragon Riding event. I could kind of see it where the Dragon Riding boss, you would want to have like your raid leader, or like if there's party leaders or something that you want to focus on and make sure you like religiously follow that one person, that they have like a really bright and in-your-face dragon riding color, and then everybody else has something more bland so you can easily follow them. I don't know. I'm kind of excited about that. Being a very druid-oriented patch, they have some banger druid forms. I don't know if they're going to make these available. This is like a rune bear form that they announced. But they also just have like fire cats, this fire chicken, which looks sick. So I'd be deeply, deeply surprised if they presented all of this stuff and then, you know, there wasn't some sort of options to be able to mog into it. So, man, that rune bear looks good. I love that. I love that. And also just some of the different Moonkin forms that they have access to going forward into it. So it's going to be pretty sick that they are coming into that. Here's some of the other transmogs that they had for the Legendary Axe and some of the other forms that they have access to. Again, I'm pretty deeply surprised that they had this sort of strength axe for a patch like this. But there's also been some announcements for upgrading. Now, they've talked about how they had the crest system and they really like the crest system going forward. Fandy had an excellent interview with Morgan Day talking about how they are making the crest fragments actually going to be a currency. There's not actually any fragments anymore. You just are collecting whole crests. But they're also going to reduce the amount of times that you're going to be able to upgrade each week. So rather than taking like 2 or 3 weeks to max out or almost max out your gear level, it's going to be a little bit steadier, but they're opting to take a couple of like quality of life changes and make a lot of the upgrades a lot more steady over time rather than just instantly getting jumped up, which I don't think will be too much of a problem, because once you got to the point where you were starting to play alts a lot, you had such a large sort of seasonal amount of crests you could earn that you could start upgrading your gear so quickly on alts and get them caught up in no time. So as long as they have something like that where there's like a sliding increase so that your alts can catch up, or if you show up late, you can catch up no problem, I think that's actually going to be really, really good. They also had some light announcements, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit more once we know some more information, or I can have some speculation going into it about healing changes. So, reading between the lines a little bit, there are discrepancies between healing in raids and M+, which is, you know, no surprise. As a result, they're looking at healing as a whole, which is a big sign. I'll talk about that in a second. And they're increasing the power of single target healing, which is going to be fantastic. Having it where, like, Holy Priest, for example, hates their single target oriented talents in all forms of content is kind of weird, to say the least. You know, and there's many such cases across the board with healers. So they'll be looking at big cooldowns and AoE healing. And the definition of looking at is probably going to be nerfing them down somewhat. They also are going to want to make decision-based healing instead of pushing your highest input AoE healing spell. So part of the problem with this is that, especially when you have like multiple symbols of hope, you have Innervate, you have source magic, you have a lot of different ways that healers are able to regen mana, and there's a lot of different spells and talents that are also able to reduce the cost of your spells. Holy Priest has things like Prayer Circle, Disc has like their new tier set, I know Monk has crazy amounts of mana that they're getting from their current tier set, and they just had Mana Tea rework. There's a lot of that. So it kind of involved every healer mashing their AoE buttons as much as they could and popping off with huge healing, and people went from 100% health to 60% health and then back to 100% again because everyone's just mashing their healing buttons as fast as they can. And in that situation, it's just frustrating because it's just all about preempting every bit of damage for every healer, and nobody really stays low, and you also don't really get punished for overhealing, right? So I think the mana adjustment stuff is going to be a good thing as long as they don't deeply mess up Mythic Plus in the process, because every season that they've had it where healers are more strained in their mana, it's always kind of boiled down to the best Mythic Plus healers are the ones that, yeah, have damage, have healing, have sustain, whatever it is for keys, but also that they don't have to like sit there and drink all the time. So I'm really going to be watching for those mana adjustments as to what kind of changes they might try to make that hopefully will not mess up what's going to be coming. They are still sticking to their guns for the disc rework, redesign. What they want to do is simplify the rotation, specifically so that it's not heavily reliant on stacking modifiers. Stacking modifiers are like Schism, Shadow Covenant, Harsh Discipline, things like that, where you're just sort of taking a lot of preparation to be able to stack up power for your spells before they actually hit hard. So, good sign. Love to be able to see that. I think Harsh Discipline, Twilight Equilibrium, Schism, Shadow Covenant, the list goes on. In a vacuum on their own, they're not bad things, but when you have so many of them like layered on top of each other, it's insanely frustrating to be able to play around. So I am very excited about that. I don't know what they're really going to be looking at with Power Infusion. It's talking about tuning and how it interacts with different specs. I mean, I'm not sure if that just means that they're going to change how other specs work to play around PI, or I'd be down if they made it personal infusion too. That would be pretty sick. But yeah, we're going to have to see what's coming into that one. And overall, 10.2 looks pretty good. I do very much believe that it's going to be the last patch of, or the last major patch or last major season of the X Pack, and that we're going to be going into BlizzCon. They're going to announce like the new expansion, and then we're going to have like a faded season once again with hopefully not really annoying like raid affixes or anything like that, which they had back in season 4 of Shadowlands. But we'll see. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks so much for checking out our quick run through of the 10.2 changes, and I'll catch y'all next time.